1348. I'm Amy Goodman. As we talk about the WikiLeaks leak. That's the whistleblower website, WikiLeaks, that has released the largest number of documents from inside the military in U.S. history, close to 400,000. Our guest, Nir Rosen, investigative journalist, author of the new book, Aftermath, following the bloodshed of America's wars in the Muslim world. Pratap Chatterjee from the Center for American Progress has done a series of pieces for The Guardian newspaper, one of the papers that have been involved in this leak, on the private militarization of the war, and David Leigh, investigations editor at The Guardian. A quick question before we go back to the contractors, and this is to David Leigh. I'm just wondering how this has played in Britain. While it got front-page coverage in the New York Times, which was involved in the leak and documenting it and writing articles about it, together with The Guardian and Der Spiegel in Germany and Le Monde in France, together with Al Jazeera as well, and Channel 4 in Britain. In the United States, the cable networks and the Sunday talk shows overall mentioned it almost not at all. This is the Sunday talk shows that talk about the key issues of the week and particularly look at the elections that are coming up. Almost no reference to these WikiLeaks, this largest leak in the history of the United States around war. How is it played in London and in Britain overall, David Leigh?
It's interesting you say that because it sounds as though many of the US media are in a state of denial about this. It's played very big in Britain. It's been picked up by all the other British media. There's TV programs going out tonight. The Sunday newspapers wrote leading articles about it. And the Deputy Prime Minister, Nick Clegg, actually said on one of yesterday's TV shows that this was such an issue of such serious concern that there should be an inquiry into it. So at a high level, the politicians are responding here. And the focus is all on concern and anxiety about these revelations of torture. Because if there's one thing that is a sore point that keeps getting scratched with the Europeans, it's that we seem to have got sucked into a process of complicity in torture, which is contrary to all we think of as Western civilization and indeed international law.
Yeah, it's very interesting what Nick Clegg said, calling for a probe of the torture claims. Pratap Chatterjee, I want to read you a part of the New York Times coverage of the role of contractors in Iraq. They write, quote, "Contractors often shot with little discrimination and few, if any, consequences at unarmed Iraqi civilians. Iraqi security forces, American troops, and even other contractors. The mayhem cropped up around Iraq, notably in one episode reported in March 2005, in which a small battle erupted involving 3 separate security companies. At a notoriously dangerous checkpoint on the main road to the Baghdad airport, a cement truck entered a lane reserved for Department of Defense vehicles. A guard from Global, a British company, fired a warning shot. And when a man initially identified as an Iraqi opened the door and tried to flee, guards from a tower started firing too. The man dropped to the ground. Then members of an Iraqi private security team parked nearby also opened fire, shooting through the chest, not the driver, but a worker from DynCorp International, an American security company. When the truck driver was finally questioned, he turned out to be a Filipino named Jose, who worked with yet a third company, KBR, the American logistics and security giant. Pratap Chatterjee, take it from there.
Well, Amy, I mean, I think what it shows is the chaos. In fact, Jim Glantz's story, I think the headline reflects that too, is there were no rules. And anybody who was there, anybody who's read the reports from that time will understand that these men worked in civilian clothes. They traveled often in unmarked cars. They were heavily armed, no doubt. But you could not tell, quote-unquote, friend from foe. I mean, they talk about the militants, being, in civilian clothes. But that was true also of the contractors. That incident you described is very interesting in the fact that the people who actually get attacked, the DynCorp employee, who I think, in fact, was an Iraqi, a local national, even though he worked for an American company. The other person involved is a Filipino. So here you have this sort of very bizarre situation, which I was confronted with myself when I would walk down a road to an American checkpoint. because I'm not white, I'm South Asian, I had to fear for my life. I had to start talking very rapidly in English because I wanted people to understand that, you know, I was simply a journalist because I knew that these people could, both the soldiers and the contractors, might shoot if they thought I was an Iraqi, and a lot of times, you know, they had no idea of the difference between one nationality and the next, and that doesn't give them carte blanche to kill people from any nationality. But what I'm trying to portray is the fact that there was a lot of confusion. There were a lot of people with no rules that governed them. I'll give you an example of somebody I know who worked for a company called Custer Battles. Custer Battles is quite famous for its overpricing of goods, and they were brought to court here in the Washington, D.C. area. But Custer Battles had a man whose job it was to buy guns on the black market, and he explained to me how he would go outside, you know, dress in local clothes, buy black market guns and supply them. We've now discovered that other companies like Blackwater have done the same thing. So there were no rules. You bought guns from the militants, you paid them off, and then you used them against civilians. It was chaos, to say the least. And I think the Bush administration has to take a lot of responsibility for what it did. And I would hope that, like Nick Clegg, the Obama administration would start to investigate these clear violations of international law and Iraqi law and U.S. law.
Nir Rosen, you, like Pratap, would be confused with being not from the United States. How did you deal with this?
I shout that I was an American as loud as I could, and I did have a few close calls. I can also confirm that American and Iraqi private security companies would buy many of their weapons on the black market. I knew the guy for one of these companies, and he would purchase his weapons in Sutter City. And many of my friends in private security companies would describe a variety of incidents on the roads that I'm sure didn't even make it into the WikiLeaks trove. You're driving down from Mosul back to Baghdad, and you see a suspicious vehicle, or maybe somebody shoots at you, and you open fire, and the people you kill are not recorded anywhere. And this was happening. If you think about the amount of convoys that security companies are protecting on a daily basis in 2005 and 2006 and how violent Iraq was, on a daily basis you had incidents all over the country of private security companies engaging civilians and engaging militias. And of course the behavior that we criticize, private security companies opening fire on civilians and acting with impunity, is no different from the American military behavior. These are actually former American military personnel, soldiers and officers for the most part. And it's not like the American military was engaged in any different kind of behavior. Now, there was a gradual improvement, perhaps, but even during the surge, where we were supposed to be protecting civilians, there was actually a surge in civilian casualties of the Americans, as the WikiLeaks reports. So sometimes I hesitate to distinguish between the behavior of private security companies and the American military, because to me, I think Iraqis suffered equally from both of them.
I wanted to go back to the quote we played at the beginning of the show, a man